Okay. Is there a second?
A second, reluctantly.
Okay. Please vote on that. All right, up next, item 17, urgency ordinance regarding Western Community Energy Joint Powers Authority implementation.
Yes, I'll be presenting this item and the next related item as well in lieu of City Attorney Eric Vale this evening. Earlier you heard from Southern California Edison on the community choice aggregation. It's my understanding you've received several presentations from WRCOG regarding Western Community Energy as well. So before you this evening are the documents to join Western Community Energy. Essentially, on this agenda, item 17, we have an urgency ordinance. An ordinance is required to participate in community choice aggregation. And so we have a form ordinance that was prepared by WRCOG that we have reviewed, and we've presented it to you tonight in this agenda item as an urgency ordinance so that it takes effect immediately due to the deadline for program participation of August 15th. And the next item will have a follow-up regular ordinance, and I'll discuss that when we get there. But for the purposes of agenda item 17, it's consideration of the urgency ordinance to authorize participation. And with that, we have representatives from WRCOG here who can answer any questions that you may have. I don't have a formal presentation. I understand that this has been before you several times, and you're well aware of the it's getting late.
So with that, does any of the council have any questions, comments, concerns, questions for WRCOG staff? You want to just move forward with it?
I have a question. I don't know who wants to answer this. So urgency ordinance, and if we didn't decide tonight for some reason, or if some city decided that they wanted to do it after the deadline, what would you tell them?
Thank you, Councilmember.
Right here. Right here, on the base of the...
Oh, there we go. All right, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. Rick Bishop, Executive Director of Western Riverside Council of Governments. The reason that we have the deadline is we basically backed into it from a January 1st requirement to submit an implementation plan to the CPUC for their review. So what we're trying to do is we want to be able to provide very accurate information and a relook at all of our assumptions, including the upcoming PCIA charge that was discussed during the workshop earlier. This gives us, if we have this August 15th date, this gives us the opportunity to know exactly how many jurisdictions and approximately how many accounts are going to be part of this. It allows us to be more diligent with the information that we provide in our draft implementation plan. After that date, it doesn't mean that the jurisdiction is ever precluded from joining. It's just that we would not be able, if we all collectively decide to go forward, then service would be provided to the residents that are part of the JPA and the businesses that are part of the cities that have joined the JPA in 2020. After August 15th, we wouldn't be able to include their numbers into the implementation plan, and therefore it would be up to the future board to decide how they want to add additional cities that desire to be part of it, but that service would not be provided to them until 2021.
All right, great. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? So we've seen this numerous times already.
At least 7.
I think that there's, personally, I think there's a benefit to our residents if we join. If our residents don't want to join, they can always opt out and stay with Edison. So I think this is just another choice and gives choice. I mean, it's bottom line. I mean, that's what it is. So, and I'll second that.
Oh, sorry. This is technically a public hearing item.
Technicalities. With that, this is a public hearing item, so I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this? No. Okay. With that, is there anybody that would like to speak on this? All right. Seeing none. So I will close the public hearing. And now we can move forward with taking a vote. So we have a motion. We have a second, so please vote. I seconded it. Yes. You're welcome. All right, and that passes unanimously. now you have a carry-on item number 18.
Yes, so this is essentially the same item, except instead of an urgency ordinance, it is a regular ordinance. We're asking you to introduce, and we have read by title, and then it will be brought back for second reading on consent calendar at your next meeting. As a part of this, also, just as a note, there's a related resolution that authorizes the execution of the joint powers agreement. There was an inadvertent mistake in the agenda packet where the wrong JPA was included, so Sarah has the correct JPA. It was inadvertently the WRCOG JPA, that established WRCOG, was included, but we have the Western Community Energy JPA before you. So that is the proper exhibit to the resolution. And with that, again, I don't know if there's any new questions regarding the format of the ordinance, but it's identical, essentially.
So can you explain why the urgency ordinance and then a follow-up regular?
It's a belt and suspenders move, essentially, where the urgency ordinance takes effect immediately, but someone, if they wanted to, could challenge the urgency findings, and they wouldn't have that basis on a regular ordinance that's adopted through the normal first and second reading procedure. However, following the normal procedure, that takes you past the August 15 date for effectiveness. So this urgency is done so that you meet the deadline, then we follow it up with the standard procedure just as a safety precaution.
Very good. All right. Any questions on this one? How do you want to move forward?
This is also a public hearing item. Yes, and this ordinance also needs to be read by title.
Okay. So with that, this is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on this ordinance? Don't all rush the mic at once. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and we can now move forward. Sarah, do you need to read it before or after? Okay. So, with that, does somebody want to move? Okay, and I will second this one. Please vote. Okay. All right, that passes. Very good. Moving along, item number 19, I heard... Oh.
It is late.
Ordinance number 18-061, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Hemet, California, authorizing the implementation of a community choice aggregation program.
Okay, thank you. Are you done now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So moving along, we have item number 19, which I heard, did you want to comment? I heard that we were going to maybe go to a special meeting on this, or did we want to continue on and just move through it?
I had a request from a council person because of the extensive nature of the questioning and such that we continue this to a special meeting. And so we have to do it by...
Correct. August 9th would be the last day you could hold a special meeting because it's due to the registrar on the 10th.
Excuse me, council members, we missed one item on the last thing. We need to name 2 members to the DJP.
I'm sorry. So on the last item, yes, a board member and alternate need to be named to the Western Community Energy Board.
Any volunteers? Bonnie?
I don't know if I can do it. Can Bonnie do it?
You want to be the volunteers for an alternate? Okay.
Good. Perfect.
All right.
Great.
There you have.
Bonnie and Russ.
Yes.
Can we just get a quick motion on those nominations?
I move to approve the nomination of Bonnie and Russ as our
And I will
representatives.
second that. All right, vote. All right, that passes. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for coming up. Sorry about that. Thank you.
It's really up to council whether they want to discuss this or continue it to another day.
August 9th is the deadline for
You know, I'm not quite sure we have gotten enough information of the impacts that it would have on the city. And you know, I know you can beat this to death, but this is a really important item and decision to make on behalf of our residents.
I sent you an email today of a public communication that came out regarding what research has been done and what the state has actually experienced and such. And so overall, I think something like 85% of the communities are still barring the sale of marijuana in the state. I think that's the right one. So you may want to take a look at that, and it might give you some insight. I think it's almost impossible to determine whether we have 1 or 5 and what their gross receipts are going to be. And we just haven't opened it up to any input. I mean, nobody's knocking down my door to say, you know, I want to do sales or manufacture or open a dispensary or whatever. So I'm not sure of the influence on the community. I'm not sure where the community's at in terms of, I thought it was fairly close with some, you know, seemed to be medical.
It's a lot from the standpoint of where the community was at.
Right.
The survey, you know, did provide that information for us as to where they're at. But I think it's really critical that we tread lightly so that we don't get ourselves stuck in a hole that we can't get out of.
One thing I was going to suggest, and did a little research on it, there's an old proposition in the state, Proposition 59, that was put out to the voters as a straw vote. And so if you want additional information, and if it can be couched so it's more favorable than the ordinance that's out there, to do a straw vote. And you know, I just thought that was interesting, and if it's legal, I wish we had done it before, but nonetheless, it's an option for you to consider over the next week or so, too.
Yeah.
And we're by no means finalizing the ordinance. I mean, as far as what the stipulations are going to be for the businesses. This is just to get it on the ballot. Is that correct?
Correct. The way it's drafted, if the measure, the city-sponsored measure is approved, you would have a year from when the election results are certified to a draft and prepare and really vet through the community an ordinance regulating the businesses. And that the initiative does set forth some basic parameters for the ordinance, but by and large it would be fleshed out through a later legislative process.
So my point is that nothing's really going to change having a special meeting or not. I mean, because we're not deciding what businesses are going to do.
This does call out numbers of dispensaries and such, and I don't necessarily agree with that. And I mean, we haven't asked Hemet PD their opinion, and we haven't looked at the implications of cities who have passed ordinances so far and how they are dealing with unintended consequences through enforcement, whether it be through in the planning process or in the code enforcement or I mean, there's so many questions that I think if it were just an initiative that says you're going to legalize it and we'll decide in the next year exactly how we're going to do that, that would be fine. But once you put it to the vote of the people and it says like 5 establishments, you know something, that's what it'll be, 5 establishments. And it's just to me, it's just another loose thing like the Mobile Art Review Commission. It just got us into trouble.
From a staff standpoint, which includes Deanna, includes Rob, and Fire Chief, we are ill-equipped to deal with any passage of an ordinance. We don't have enough police to delegate, to put on assignment. Dana doesn't have the staff to process it, and it would just put us really behind the 8 ball, even if it's a year from now. We're backlogged on all other kinds of things, and yes, it would be wonderful to pick up $1 million in revenue, but we've been told by the consultants in the first 2 years it may cost us $1 million to gear up for it with no revenue coming in and such. And so I don't think the staff would be unhappy. Maybe I would, because you lose possible revenue, but we're just not equipped based on all the cutbacks and such, and jobs we need to do, and the customer service we need to really work on and such, and the engineering aspects that from our standpoint, and I think Rob agrees, he's not geared up for it. He's going to need more policemen. They're going to need to be trained, et cetera, to deal with it. Chris and I have been talking to some outside attorneys too to see if they specialize in it, and they really don't. They kind of play it by ear and such. And so it would be, I've kind of said it, that from a staff recommendation, we are just not prepared to take on something this immense.
Well, and I would like to say, I don't think we're prepared to deal with the city that we have right now because of all the illegal dispensaries. We're clearly not dealing with them. So, what do we do about it? Just stop dealing with them? Well,
No, I don't think you can, but there's going to, Linda has talked about in terms of raising enough revenue to provide the funds for the enforcement of it, so that's kind of a push approach to it. I don't think there's any answer to the black market. I think the more the revenues increase and the more the state increases and such, the more people will go to the black market on this. I think it's just an evil that comes with it. There were evils during Prohibition too, where hooch you could buy or whatever. And so I think that, and the state has dumped the enforcement on us, right, Rob? To deal with the black market situation and such, and we're ill-equipped to deal with that, but we have to do something on it because we know they're illegal pursuant to the city's ordinances. It just seems like we're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper in this thing, and if we can, through the increase in policemen, increase the enforcement, and deal with that item. It's just, I don't know how else to put it. We as staff don't think we can be as much help to this thing. And we know it's a policy issue of the council, and we'll obviously do what the council wants us to do or what the people vote for and such. This is just a layer of government that the city doesn't need to get involved in if we can avoid it. We can't avoid it on the black market.
So if we just let those people pass their ordinances and let them vote on it, let the people decide, and then are we going to be able to deal with that?
Yeah.
Are we equipped to deal with the ordinances that are going to be on the ballot?
Probably not. And we'll probably end up suing, claiming it's a monopoly like San Bernardino did, and the court ruled in favor of San Bernardino. It's a similar ordinance, so we'll probably have to take that path.
And I'm not saying that I'm totally against legalizing within the city limits of Hemet, because I realize I'm the one that brought this up, that said we really need to talk about this again because it's costing us a fortune to close down the illegal establishments, and we need a revenue stream to offset that. But at the same time, I look at this proposed ballot measure, and I don't like it. I mean, there's things in here that I have questions about, and what would be the implication. And I think we as a council need to bring that out and discuss it and have comments from the public at the same time, because this is something, if it goes on ballot, they're going to be voting on, and they need to know what they're going to be voting on. But at the same time, it needs to be something that is controllable, that's not going to throw all of us under the bus, so to speak, and that's something that's enforceable but workable, that trying to get this out, that can be massaged enough going forward that it could be something that would be beneficial to the city and not something that's going to create more chaos.
No argument. It seems if no counter ballot is put on, and then the limitations that you as a city council have in opposing the ordinance and such, that there has to arise a citizens or business group that will take this on, take that ordinance on.
Absolutely.
And could we become a part of a consortium to, with other cities that might feel the same way if a lawsuit is decided?
You're going to have to
But
turn
there's
to your legal.
4 cities right now, right, that this
It's
person
possible.
is involved in.
It would really depend on how close each of the different ordinances in the various cities that would match up. And typically what you would see is actually separate lawsuits. And if they're in the same county, a judge might order consolidation of the matters. But San Bernardino is a different county, it's a different court system, so that wouldn't work there. So
I think
it really would just depend on
the biggest concern that I have is the so-called citizens initiative that has qualified for the ballot. So, I mean, that was a lot of my motivation for wanting to see us put a countermeasure, a counter proposal out there that was more controllable from our perspective. Notwithstanding the issues that city manager raises about our ability to really manage it, the fact of the matter is we're going to have an initiative that could very well pass. And if it doesn't pass, then we're okay. If it passes, then we have to look at maybe some litigation over the monopoly issue. But nevertheless, it's, from my opinion, an undesirable consequence to have something like that passed as a citizen initiative that really wasn't. It was misrepresented, and we're going to have to deal with that. So we're kind of on the horns of a dilemma here because, to Carly's point, we're overwhelmed with the illegal operations now, and we're overburdening our code enforcement and our system to try to deal with that. And yet, I have to agree that the regulation and the licensing and the fining is going to get to the point. I mean, it's an attractive revenue stream to a point, but it will also re-energize the black market, because people say, I can sell you this at a lower price because I'm not having to pay all the overhead of the fees and licensing. So it's really a catch-22 dilemma. So I guess we could take a chance and just say, let's write it out and see what the voters do in November with the other initiative, and revisit and adjust accordingly. I don't know. It's really an untenable situation, and it's unfortunate that we're in this predicament.
The other problem is the ordinance that's been prepared is probably as broad as you can be, and we had talked. You had talked about that in terms of let the market decide what it wants to put in, etc. That survey that they did was kind of close. I mean, and so it seems if our counter ordinance were constructed to be more for medical marijuana and restricting the adult 21 kind of stuff, it might be an easier choice for the community to make, to go that route than to open the door to a full market. And so, at least when we talked to Rick, again at the staff, there were some concerns with that. Exactly what were we opening, Pandora's box for, in terms of allowing, a bunch of uses, and where we're going to put them, and how we're going to deal with them, and the whole deal. I still think you ought to adjourn it to a special session. We can talk with the attorneys and such, and see what we can dig up in terms of what other cities are experiencing and such, and see if we can find something for you to hang your hats on, one way or another. Because that's what it's really about right now. Yeah.
Question for the city attorney. If we opt not to put a city initiative out there, and what's our latitude as a city, as a council, to openly publicly oppose the citizen-based initiative?
So pretty limited. You do have the ability to, as a council, adopt a resolution formally opposing the citizen-sponsored measure. However, besides that, California law is pretty strict about using public funds and public resources on advocacy for ballot measures. It's not allowed. You can do educational and informational outreach, but it can't veer into advocacy as a vote for one way or the other.
So if we were requested to come to a service club and speak to the topic, we could, educationally.
Well, you as a private citizen have unrestricted rights. It's in terms of using public resources, and so that's really the framework you're looking at. Is there going to be a use of public money or facilities, things like that involved? And our firm's done very detailed guidance to lots of agencies on the ins and outs of what's permissible in that context, and we could advise you on that. But what you do as private citizens and your own time is up to you.
So it would not be under the auspices of a convened council, but if it's routine that people ask council members to come speak to whatever topic at whatever service club or organization. So that would be
generally permissible. I hate to give absolutes, but as a general rule, that would be fine as long as it's not something that you're utilizing any sort of city funding to attend that event. There's really no formal city involvement, and it's sort of in your off time. It's not part of a convened meeting or a city function, something like that.
okay. Got my answer.
So is this something that you guys want to move to a special meeting in the coming week or two? So check your calendar and come up with a couple dates.
I mean, I'm hearing that staff is not necessarily warm and fuzzy to the idea of us having a counter proposal on the ballot, and so I don't know.
You know, whatever your policy is, or the citizens' policy, and we'll accommodate it to the best we can. Our issue is we don't have the resources. Period. No matter what ordinance is passed or what ordinance comes up, it will mean until some revenue flows, there will be diverting code enforcement officers, for example, from cleaning up the city. They're going to be concentrating on pot shops and things like that. It means the process that you go through when we went over to Desert Hot Springs have a very extensive process. The applicants, these were for grows, were paying $35,000 up front, and then all kinds of FBI checks, and you had to ferret out, examine each employee that they have and the ownership and all that. That's going to fall on us. And so When I say we're reluctant to get in that because we'd like some resources to do some other stuff in the way of cost customer service and such, and just don't see this as a huge priority. But if you told me to get it done, we would get it done. But I'm not saying don't put an ordinance out there. I'm saying the ordinance that's proposed might exacerbate what we would have to do because it's so open to the market as opposed to the enforcement aspects of it. And I think, perhaps we can come up with a more amenable kind of ordinance that closes that loop a little bit and such. So I think you probably need to do an alternative to put out before the voters to counteract that particular measure that's out there. I don't know what the magic bullet is. I don't think anybody does. Yeah.
So do you want to go to a special meeting?
I know, we're good at that.
Okay. So give me some dates.
Tuesday the 31st is a fifth Tuesday, so planning commission's not in here.
That's not a good hit for me. Unless we did it for
Special meeting.
Yes, August 9th.
Yeah, August 9th.
That's a Thursday, because the actual deadline to submit to the registrar of voters is the 10th, which is a Friday. So you would have to take action on the day before so we can get it to the registrar in time.
That would not be an issue. That would not be an issue.
Is Tuesday the 7th work?
Planning commission is probably, their council. Yeah, there you go.
Tuesday the 7th?
But you would have to make your decision because it would have to go to the registrar. You don't have to start your meeting. It's not a regular meeting. It does not have to begin at 7 p.m. You can begin your meeting whatever time you
4 or 5?
4 or 5 o'clock.
Lonnie, what time can you?
I'd be right here by 4:30.
I'll do 5.
Tuesday the 7th.
Give us something.
Okay.
Before we get here.
Tuesday the 7th at 5 o'clock? Correct?
Tuesday, July 7th.
Possible.
August 7th. August.
Okay. Tuesday the 7th at 5 o'clock.
If I may, just because that special meeting is so close to the deadline, and there's no real wiggle room to do another special meeting or very little, that if you have any specific questions, comments, revisions you'd like made, please contact myself and Alan as soon as possible so we can get revised versions prepared. Even if we have to bring multiple different versions in your packet for your consideration, that's something that can be done, but we need the comments before, obviously. So.
And I would recommend that we actually post it as an adjourned council meeting as opposed to a special. So if something needs to be added or amended that night, we can. So I will post it as adjourned meeting. We post it 72 hours. That way you don't have that. You're not locked into no changes, additions, or anything that evening. So we would on an adjourned, so you'll be an adjourned meeting. Okay.
All right, very good. Okay.
Do you mind, Ryan?
Yes, sir.
The council needs to appoint a representative and an alternate for the League of California Cities Conference in Long Beach.
I'm going.
Because you're part of the league, right?
I'm part of the week, yes.
I'm probably going, I haven't registered yet, but I'm probably.
Linda, you're paid for to go?
Yes.
And we are meeting the Transportation, Communication, and Public Works Policy Committee is meeting to bring a resolution to the floor of the General Assembly at that. I think we're the only ones.
So a recommendation for the delegate and the alternate.
Anything? Next one? Okay.
No, because that's right, my vacation.
Oh, well, come on, and you wouldn't,
Are you going?
Do you want a motion on that? Do we need that?
Yes, actually, the league requires it.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we are sending Linda and Russ as our representatives to the League of Cities in Long Beach.
To who? Hmm?
Linda and Russ.
Linda?
Linda and Russ.
Huh?
Thank you for a second. Thank you.
Motion and a second. All right.
Oh, somebody didn't vote. Oh, Councilmember Ray. Thank you.
And then you adopted on the consent calendar, and Linda had the questions about the 107 East Mayberry. All right, you need to sit now as the regular meeting of the Housing Authority. Hmm?
We have to do that next.
Have to do this one? Next. Right. So
That'll be,
Sarah needs to call to order.
that'll be after we close this meeting.
Sorry, before we move on, Sarah
Yes.
pointed out that we had some speaker cards on the cannabis item, and I don't know if we want to see if anyone is still interested, or if they want to reserve their comments for the continued hearing.
Who requested to speak? Did you want to speak now, or do you want to come back? Sarah, do you want to call?
Okay, so I had Marie McDonald, James Lobenzano. So he's got Michael Lee, Chris Henry, and Lanny Swerdlow, and he actually had 6 minutes.
Okay.
So,
So if we can, the speakers, if you could line up so that you're already ready to go so we can get through this quickly. Marie, you're up.
Ready for me?
Hi, thank you for opening this up for some discussion. I'm concerned that the limitation of cannabis in Hemet to only medical dispensaries is really not reflective of what the community wants. The resolution 64 that was passed in 2016, the vote here in Hemet was, the majority was open recreational as well as medical. And the survey that you sent out was, who was it sent to? Some people got it, some people didn't. But what you were proposing was based on the results of that survey, which I think was not factual, because it certainly was not, the questions were not asked of the entire group of residents, not like 64 in 2016. So that vote in 2016 was much more reflective of what the community wanted than the survey that was conducted. I just want to make that point really clear. Thank you.
Up next.
Make it quick. It's late. My name is James Lobenzana, and I own the local Mayflower Moving Company here. It's been in the same continuous location for almost 50 years. My wife and I, Julie, have owned it for 20 years. We've done business with nearly every agency in this city, in the county. You put together your initiative, we put together ours. I'm a committee member. There are 6 of us, and I'm a local businessman, my wife and I. I got together with experienced operators. These guys have been in business under the medical and now recreational in Cathedral City. Very successful. I don't know what you heard about Desert Hot Springs, but check Cathedral City. Things are working well there. Things are working well in Oregon, Washington. I got together with these guys because my business has been affected by the illegal growths. They were adjacent properties. Police and fire and code enforcement can attest to that. Transformers blowing out, these guys coming and going. They're as bad as all the recyclers in town. So we put together an initiative. We gathered 5,800 signatures, qualified by the clerk. That's almost a quarter of the population, the voter population here in Hemet. This is a true citizen-backed initiative. The majority of people voted for 64. That's recreational. We are a small group, but it's not going to be a powerful group because we're small. We're giving, under our initiative, we give all the power back to you after 2 years. Because you don't want the Wild West here. You want experienced operators mixed with some local people doing the right thing. $10 a square foot. We've got almost 200,000 square foot of space here in town. And if you read our initiative, that money is going to go to what people care about in this town. Crime and homelessness. And that's all we heard tonight. Everybody up here says the same thing, including the council members. So, we sincerely believe our initiative is what's best for the city. And if you read it, it gives all the power back to you in 2 years. And because we're such a small group, we'll work directly with police, code enforcement, and fire. So, we'll be back on the 7th or the 9th. And we are just beginning our outreach. But, we plan on getting out to all of you. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City Manager. My name is Christopher Henry. I'm going to take Michael Lee's time as well. He donated his time before he walked out. Okay, so I'm a representative of FC4, Southern California Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. We've worked throughout various cities to help educate council members, staff, police departments, fire departments, how to properly implement responsible regulation. Well, we constructed this initiative. Prior to that, about 2 years ago now, we actually met with the then city manager, approached them and said, hey, look, we're considering the city based on what the voter population is and the demographic of the city. They were reluctant to engage at the time, so we went ahead and through overtime conducted survey after survey internally, and when the time was right, we went for the initiative. What we've done with the initiative, what I want you guys to really pay close attention to, as James said, we give power back to the city within 2 years. What we don't want is we don't want the control. We want something responsible for the city, and we know that you don't have the manpower to usher in a full cannabis ordinance per se. So we've left dispensing out of it. Dispensing itself is cumbersome. You have loitering, you have all of that, you have a lot of security things that has to be identified. So what we've done is we took in the dispensaries out of it. We gave you a foot in the door by allowing cultivation facilities, manufacturing, testing, which is big, and other businesses within the cannabis umbrella. By eliminating dispensaries, that immediately eliminates your policing of the cannabis business. What you have to keep in mind is that for years and years, there's been illegal operations of cultivation facilities, cultivation houses, cultivation and commercial business operating. We're seeing a demise of those, and we're starting to see them flush out of the legal sector. And the reason for that is there is a high demand for licensed cannabis product. The black market is shrinking because the money that they used to make when 10 years ago, they were getting $5,000 a pound. 5 years ago, they were getting $3,000 a pound. Now they're getting under $1,000. And as the legal market starts to take over the cannabis industry as a whole and become more structured and more, has more guidelines and more, the bar is set a little bit higher, you start to see the black market start to disappear because the revenues just aren't there any longer. And the bar is set so high for the cannabis industry by the state that these businesses that operate within the black market cannot qualify to operate in the legal market. Has goods and bads. But as we put this initiative together, we kept in mind the small size of the city, the legal and the financial constraints of the city. With this initiative, the Citizens Initiative, what it does is it's going to allow you your foot in the door, as I stated before. In 2 years, if you feel as a council that dispensaries are permittable at that time, you may do that. If you want to limit the ordinance at that time, you may do that. Keep in mind, the process of licensing these facilities is going to take you roughly a year to get through that process. It's a lengthy process. So the next year, once these businesses are licensed, at that point, then you'd have the opportunity to say, okay, this is working or it's not working. Let's limit, let's increase. Without dispensaries, your police power, as stated before, it diminishes. The manufacturing facilities, the cultivation facilities, all of that has very heavy constraints and very heavy legal requirements to be able to operate on a state level. The city doesn't have to develop that. The state has already developed that. And for any business to operate under that umbrella, they have to comply with the state. So my advice to you is read it. Go back to council. Have your council educate you about getting the power back. Have your council educate you about exactly what the concentration levels are within I don't remember the exact distance, so don't quote me, but within a various space within your manufacturing district and your light manufacturing district, it only limits so many. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's 3 within 1,000 or 3,000 feet, somewhere in that area. So it's not monopolized. What it is it's a concentration barrier, which you don't want is to be overrun with these facilities as well. And we've kept all of that in mind while writing this. We currently operate and run various facilities throughout the state. We have a heavy footprint in Cathedral City. We work directly with the city. We've donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to those cities. We've also donated things for San Jacinto. We're in San Jacinto as well. And we've donated bikes to different charities, bikes to churches and things of that sort. So the cannabis industry likes to give back to the community. We want to give you our money. We want to pay taxes. We want to be legal. It's a legal business. And if you guys have the time, take the time, individually or as a group, go to Cathedral City or some of these other places and tour some of these facilities. See how they operate. See how their security procedures are in place, and see what kind of guidelines they have and that the state has imposed to allow them to operate. The tax revenue, yes, you need to consider that as well. To give you an idea of what the city can experience, Cathedral City has gone on record indicating in the next 2 years they will receive over $25 million in tax revenue with the current ordinances that are in place. That's a city of 43,000 people. So keep that in mind as well. It's on the record. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lanny Swordlow. I'm from the Multidisciplinary Association for Plant Propagation, formerly known as the Marijuana Anti-Prohibition Project. We have been here. We are an Inland Empire-based medical marijuana patient support group and a marijuana law reform organization. We've been meeting since December of 1999. We currently have 3 monthly meetings, one in Moreno Valley, one in Palm Springs, and one in Joshua Tree every month. We have been involved in most of the ordinances that have been passed, including we were the group that was behind in 2008 that got Palm Springs to allow the first medical marijuana collectives to operate. First off, I just want to quickly back up what Marie McDonald said. The ordinance, Proposition 64, was passed by a majority of the voters. And if Joe won the election and Jane didn't, and then they did a survey later on, and the survey said, gee, Jane should be mayor and Joe shouldn't be mayor, you wouldn't use that survey to change the offices. You go by a vote of the people, and the vote of the people in Hemet said, we want to see legal marijuana available to everybody who is 21 and over. And your ordinance does not do that. It restricts it to medical marijuana. That's not what the voters of Hemet wanted. And you, sir, said we should implement the will that we're here on this city council to do what the voters want. And the voters want to see total recreational available. Now, what I want to talk about here is you've got two ordinances possibly. I want to just give you a couple little facts here on cultivation, because one of the major concerns here is taxes. And I understand that you're several $1 million in the hole, and marijuana might help restore that. It's not going to come from cultivation. The Bureau of Cannabis Control asked the California Department of Agriculture to do a study and estimate how much marijuana is consumed in the state of California and how much is produced. And the California Department of Agriculture came back with these statistics. Californians consume 2.6 million pounds of marijuana every year. California produces 13.5 million pounds of marijuana. So where does it go? It goes out of state. And now we have all these new cultivation facilities coming up, producing more marijuana already to an overproduction market. And if you think you're going to make lots of money off of cultivation taxes, you're not going to. Let me point out the grape industry, the wine industry, grape and wine industry. The total value of all grapes grown in the state of California, both table grapes and wine grapes, is $5 billion a year. The total valuation of product from the wine industry is $57 billion a year.
Thank you, sir.
Taxes are not made from cultivation. I have 6 minutes, sir.
You're 3 minutes.
He actually had 6 minutes.
Okay, never mind.
Gosh, you know, it's funny you didn't tell that to any of these other people. Thank you.
Their red light didn't go off, that's why.
But they had more than 3 minutes. Why my time and they aren't? I guess you don't like me.
Well, we know you had 6 minutes.
Where was I? Oh, yes. The wine industry is $57 billion a year. So your taxes are not going to come off of cultivation. Your taxes are going to come off of distribution. And not to have distribution for both medical marijuana and recreational marijuana is absurd. Marijuana is here. It's been here and it's not going away. You have recreational users here. You have medical marijuana users here. Why in the world do you want to only sell to medical marijuana users, and the people who are 21 and over who are legally entitled to have access to it have to drive to Palm Springs or to Paris or more likely deal with the criminal market? I don't understand. Why do you want to empower the criminal market? One of the major reasons so many of us backed Proposition 64 was to end the criminal market. And when cities pass bans or they only allow certain type of business, they're just empowering the criminal market. And the criminal market doesn't pay any taxes. So all that money that's going to be spent by people 21 and over who are legally entitled to it, you're not going to get a dime of it. You've got to think about that. This ordinance that you're pursuing, I read the ordinance. It's not a bad ordinance. Whoever drafted it did a pretty good job. But you need to add recreational to it because you're going to cut yourself out of millions of dollars of taxes, and you're just going to continue the criminal market. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure the cultivation people are going to be applauding me. I don't think they want to hear that. I do have these brochures I want to give you. One of them has been produced by the Drug Policy Alliance, From Prohibition to Progress, a status report on marijuana legalization. It looks what's happened in the 8 states that have legalized marijuana. This is a brochure that I put out called What Every Elected Official, Candidate, and Voter Should Know About Legalizing Marijuana, what's happening in other states compared to what's happening in California. And this is a recent story that just came out. California cannabis cities reap millions in sales taxes. Those that have not are not. And I think you'll find these all very interesting. I have enclosed my business card here with them. And if you have any more questions, I would be happy to meet with you and talk with you about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers that would like to speak on this topic? Okay. Now, we can move along. Okay, so So we're going to continue this on to the next meeting on the 7th. Okay. I encourage you all to be there August 7th, 5 p.m. All right. 5 p.m. Okay. Up next, council reports. Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, just real quickly, I attended a meeting that was orchestrated by our emergency preparedness coordinator, and it was held at the library, and it was on the subject of the Diamond Valley Lake inundation plan, and it was a very good informative presentation by Metropolitan Water, part of their emergency action plan for inundation. So I won't go into any of the details, but I did ask the presenter to provide me a copy of her PowerPoint presentation, so I'll share that in more detail with you at another time. And that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper. Councilmember Ray.
I'll forego it.
Councilmember. Okay, thank you. I don't have anything at this time to report. Ad hoc committee reports. Anything? And city manager report. Okay. Future agenda items. I think we have a nice long list here.
I have one of them.
Okay.
But, and I'd also like to see some of these off.
Sure.
Because we keep adding.
That's what I was just going to say. We need to start working on some of these.
In lieu of the fact of
The problems that we had this last July 4th, we need to revisit our policy on fireworks and make it a little bit more, get a little bit more teeth into it. I know we have a zero tolerance for it, but evidently that's not enough. So we need to determine whether or not we're going to require some significant fines for this illegal act. And so I'd like to cover that.
All right. Okay. With that, we will recess to the Housing Authority. Sarah, can we have a roll call for the Housing Authority?
Board Member Brown.
Here.
Board Member Krupa.
Here.
Board Member Meyer.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Wright.
Here.
Chairperson Persico.
Here. The first item is the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve, or are there any items that need to be pulled?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, please vote.
Sorry, that's me.
All right, very good. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to address on any of the non-agenda items? All right, seeing none, future agenda items for the Housing Authority. None? Okay. We will adjourn the Housing Authority. And with that, we will continue to close session.
We do have one item still that we didn't consider at the 6 o'clock session of anticipated litigation, so.
Can we do that down here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.